All right, here we are. PR and communication in the service of marketing, the evil magical marketing, the thingy you use to make your game sells and make millions of dollars. My name is Pawel Miechowski, like Pawel said. I work at 11-bit, which is a developer from Warsaw, known for Frostpunk or This War of Mine, and a publisher as well of external titles such as Moonlighter and Children of Morta. And I'm gonna be a smartass here, sharing my knowledge about PR and communication because I'm doing it for more than 15 years probably from now. In games, sharing with other jobs like writer and tester, for example, as well. And so you know, 3 of our titles made it to the top of bestsellers, the last 3 ones, so I think we're pretty good at what we're doing. So I'm gonna share some insights with you, mostly the strategic approach before everything happens, not the how to send a Steam key to a YouTuber, because this is obvious that you have to do it, but some strategic approach that we process before we even go to marketing the game. So let's begin with some standard definition. What is PR? What is public relations? So it's the practice, as you can see, of deliberately managing the spread of information between a company or development team and the public. That's a definition I applied to our gaming industry because when you think about it, PR, it's much more than that. Think of a PR manager for a political party. In such understanding, a PR manager is not selling a game, not a product, just a vision of some political party that is usually widely not liked by the public, but you still need to manage the information and a good image, if it is possible at all, of a political party. So in this understanding, PR is the spread of information and the image. In our case, spreading information, it's the game itself, because sending a review key to media and YouTubers is spreading the game itself. Awareness about the game, so people know about it. Everywhere they go to a B2C show like Gamescom or E3 or anything you can think of, they should be aware about your game. They should be aware about your game because they read in media. When they visit a Steam page or a Xbox store page, they should have at least some resemblance of your title, so your title is not an unknown entity. And it's also spreading details about the game, a genre, a synopsis, an elevator pitch, wherever you can think about it. And in the wider sense, PR is also the practice of creating, promoting, or maintaining goodwill and a favorable image of the company among the public. So that means that it's not also reaching media, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, but also creating some form of vision of your game and your company, and convincing the public that the vision is true and it is as it is. It's quite important because if you don't have the vision on your own, you're not going to have a clear goal of what you want to achieve, where you want to be, or what you want to create in the end. To give you an example, at the very beginning, 11-bit was planned to be a development team that put genres upside down or mix game genres just to bring some new value in the gameplay area, because our first games were very gameplay driven. And I've been spreading this information among the media just to convince them that we are as such, and after some times we have been perceived as such, and it's just thanks to differentiate ourselves from other companies. So you need a vision, just think of it. Let's go further. What is the function of PR in marketing? As you can see, to communicate about the product, to reach out to media, public/community with the product, and create a proper image of the product and the company. I know that many developers, and it's understood, and I respect that, consider themselves artists, and artists create artworks, right? Not products. But if you want to have solid sales, you should be at least thinking in marketing lingo, because it helps. It's not that marketing is or PR and communication being part of bigger thing that is marketing. It's not a bunch of tips and tricks. It's a deep knowledge helping people to create a well-thought strategy that in the end ends in good sales. If you think about big successful companies, they have big bunch of marketing folks planning the strategic approach and executing it later on, and it's no different at 11-bit studios. At the moment, let me do the math, we have 12 people in the publishing and marketing division working only on selling games and acquiring them for our publishing. So if this is the function, when you should be applying this function or put it into motion, so to speak. At the very beginning, last month I met Ryan, the guy who created Crypt of the Necrodancer, and we had the pleasure to participate in a round table about marketing in games, and we both had this quite obvious thought that marketing begins at the very beginning. So when you start to create a game, you just write down your first 3 lines of what your game is about to be. This is where the marketing begins. This is where you think if the game is marketable at all, if it has any unique feature that later will be described as unique selling point. I will elaborate about it later. If it has anything unique that makes it different from other products, if it is marketable at all. Looking at many companies, I'm afraid I see that they do not think that way. There is even the joke in Polish game development scene that 2 indie game developers meet and one says to another, so you're an indie game developer, says something in indie game developer-ish. And the answer is, I have a unique puzzle platformer. And if you get the joke, you know what I mean. There's nothing unique in puzzle platformer unless your puzzle platformer has, for example, mechanics that none other does, or if its quality is standing out. Because sometimes if you think about games, okay, I see a successful game that is super similar to some other successful game. Why is it successful? Mostly because, for example, it offers quality that the previous one doesn't. So there's always something, there has to be always something unique, and this is the selling point. I will, like I said, elaborate about it later. And if you don't think about marketable feature of your game at the very beginning, you are risking making a generic game, and generic games don't sell, period. And like I said, this is the moment that you should be thinking at the very beginning, and that's what we do. If I would one day make a talk making of marketing at 11-bit, I would begin exactly with this. At the very beginning, when the first idea is written, we think if it's marketable at all, and if it is, how to approach communication and PR and entire marketing later. And I will go to creating the strategy. So the first topic we think of is if it has a potential, if there are similar games on the market, if there are similar games on the market, what makes our own different one? what are the strong points of the game, what are the weak points, so-called SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I think you may have heard about it. So you should do this at the very beginning. Then we are already thinking about what is the potential audience for our game, what is the niche. Sometimes when you make a, for example, 4X game, strategy game, then it's pretty clear what kind of niche of gamers you are targeting. Niche is a word that means something small within a big entity, but in fact, you know how it works in gaming industry. Niche is your core group of gamers within this huge bunch of gamers all around the world. Sometimes, and in marketing lingo, it's called red ocean or blue ocean, and that means red ocean is an ocean you're already entering and it's full of others. Blue ocean is exploring terra incognita or creating your own ocean, so to speak. And what I mean by this is that sometimes you create your own niche. And if I think about it, maybe Mojang's Minecraft was such a good example because, you know, it's a game about crafting and creating a world within a world. So there was no really anything like this before. So they kind of created their own niche, which turned out to be huge in the end. So the word niche may be misleading a bit, but in the end, it's your core group, because in the end, even Minecraft is not for everyone. Then what we think of is the release calendar. Even if we start and we know the project will take 3 years, at this very moment we think what will happen 3 years from now, what will be the platforms, PlayStation 5 maybe, okay, let's start to think about it already. Streaming platforms, maybe. I still don't believe in streaming platforms yet, and Google Stadia floppy start lately was an example, but streaming sooner or later will be the thing, maybe not yet. But my point was that we are already thinking at the very beginning about the timing of the release and our entire campaign, and I will refer to it later as well. Of course, you need to think about the platforms. Sometimes PC for indie smaller games or even AA games is a key platform because consoles, except Switch, are heavily taken by AAAs. If you have a killer hit, then sure, every platform is good. But from my experience, PC and Nintendo Switch are the best platforms for smaller games. Xbox One and PS4 are great platforms for bigger games, or for including PS and Switch as well. Then, of course, revenue streams. So you should be thinking what your model is going to be, because that will influence the shape of your game as well. For example, you may come up with a game that has some basics that in your idea would not be the main revenue stream, but extra DLCs and microtransactions would be. So your platform should be, for example, some subscription offer like Humble Monthly or a free game at Epic, because then your model is to make extra money on DLCs and microtransactions. So anyway, those are the things you should be thinking about the very beginning. And if we think that public relations is a tool that you use, what kind of tool it would be? One that informs gamers and media about a game, one that connects the game with media and games, and most importantly, one that multiplies the number of connections. Because it's great to have your game on a famous YouTube channel, but it's way better to have your game at 500 YouTube channels, because this is how you spread awareness. Sometimes I met with a somewhat strange approach that people are afraid with sharing their game on Twitch and YouTube before the launch, being afraid that showing the game would be full of spoilers and would unveil entire meat, so to speak, of the game, entire, you know, essence. And come on, let's be honest, if you don't show your game, people don't know about it. So never ever be afraid of throwing millions of keys at streaming platforms and famous YouTubers and so on, because this is your free benefit. If you are afraid that there are major spoilers in the game that you are that you simply don't want to show, please inform people. Even you can tailor it in the game. We did that once, as far as I remember, with Frostpunk, that we gave the game to YouTubers, and there was an opening screen in the game, before the launch of the game, of course, saying, feel free to show the game, but please leave the ending hidden so the gamers can discover it themselves. And it pretty much worked. Okay, and now let's go to the most important part, so creating the strategy. How to create the tool, how to shape up the tool that PR is. So you need to keep in mind that public relations, at least in gaming industry, but I suppose in most industries, is a part of entire process that is called marketing, and communication is something that have a blurry boundary with public relations. In fact, those are integral parts of a bigger process called marketing. Nowadays, even paid content is closer to marketing than PR than it used to be. So the boundary between what is PR within marketing is even more blurry nowadays. It's so integrated. But going further, since PR is a tool that serves marketing, in my opinion, we need to define it at the very beginning, like entire marketing as well. So defining the product is the basics of the marketing. So at the very beginning, before you start the campaign, which, like I said, should happen at the very beginning, even when you start to design the game, you should start designing, and I use this word deliberately, you should start designing your marketing campaign. A title, a genre, that's obvious because you're gonna be exploring the niches within your genre, if it's, for example, a strategy game. Positioning, that means you should be aware who are you targeting. AAA, so that's obvious, right? Mid-core, indie games, hyper-casual. You should know where your area is, so to speak. Then pricing in distribution. Price point is also quite important thing in marketing, because too high price can kill a product, unfortunately, and kind of minimize the unique selling points. Then synopsis, which is basically your elevator pitch. You really should know how to sell your game in maximum 3 sentences. If you need to explain for 10 minutes what your game is, then you are in trouble. Imagine you are meeting a journalist on a game developer session, and there are some here. If you need 10 minutes to explain what your game is about, then it's a real problem. In the end, it's a game. So think about it, that it has some unique theme and the mechanics behind it. That's all that you need to actually explain. Core gameplay, that says exactly what you're doing in the game. Direct competition, like I said, is defining what similar games or similar genres are your competition, and key features. I often see that people mistake key features with unique selling point, and this is super important. Key features are the descriptive features of your product that cannot be cut out, because otherwise your product wouldn't be the same product. But your key feature is, for example, my game gives 100 hours of gameplay, it's action RPG, It's got this gameplay and that gameplay mechanics. It describes your product in a way that if you cut out one key feature, your product is not your product anymore. But this is not a unique selling point. This is something different. But those are things that I would describe as marketing. Now let's go to PR and communication. So at the very beginning, you should define what is your target audience, what is the media landscape, and what is the impact and feel. Target audience, okay, who are those people? I think you should be aware of the Bartles type of a player. That's an analysis made by a guy called Bartle. And he divided gamers into socializer, achiever, and so on. It's publicly available. You can find it on Wikipedia. You don't have to use a Bartles taxonomy of players to find your target audience. Just think about what is the person that I am creating the game for. It's kind of important because your communication, your channels of communication will be different depending on whom you are creating the game for. Different platforms of communication is using a teenager, completely different platforms of communication is using a guy like me who is 40 plus at the moment. So you can think about age, you can think even about a personality of interests. If your gamer is a total hardcore gamer playing 50 games a month, or just a girl who is casually approaching a game once a 3 months because her friend told her about the game. So think about any kind of trait you could say about your target audience, yeah, about your gamer. Even geography. Different games have, so to speak, a sex appeal in China, different one in the United States. There are some special geographic, even cultural traits that you can use. To give you an example, our last game, Children of Morta, which was maybe not a huge success, but we were super happy with how it sells. It talks about a family. It's an action RPG, but the unique feature is that you can play entire family, father, daughters, sons. And since family is a main theme, we knew that there are countries that are more conservative, more traditional oriented, and Russia is such a country. So we've put extra efforts on marketing and communication in Russia, and it paid off because we had a really great sales in Russia, especially on PC market, because as you may know, Russia is heavily PC oriented. There is a big console market, but it's just a small portion of what the PC market is there. So we've knew this knowledge. So my point is, think about your target audience, whom you are creating the game for in the end. Then, going back to media, it's obvious that you should be thinking what media you're going to use to communicate about your game. Social media is obvious, right? Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, but not all of the media fit for everything, and not every audience is sitting on every single social media platforms, and they are also classic standard media. Like if you make PlayStation 4 game, then obviously PCgamer.com is not your media. Rock, Paper, Shotgun is not your media. PlayStation Lifestyle, yes please. So you should be thinking about what kind of channels, what exact media you're gonna use. And then this is also pretty important in PR, impact/feel. This is something I could describe as, think of what you want make the gamer or a journalist feel when he hears about a game, or she, or later when she or he plays the game. So if you are making a power fantasy RPG that's that is about most powerful wizard in the universe. This is what you exactly want your gamer to feel at the end. That will define not only the communication, but also the design of the game, and both should be aligned. So we're going later, and we're going further, and what you should define is USP, unique selling point. I will refer about USP in a few more slides later, because this is super duper important. Anyway, you're gonna have to define your USP. Communication areas. Communication areas is practically how to sell your USP, or how to explain it, or how to picture it. And I'm gonna give you an example of how we've done it before. And finally, lingo meets the language you're gonna use in communicating the game. If you have a super serious game, don't use humor. If you have a very funny humoristic game, don't be too serious. If you have a game like brilliant game Arma by Bohemia, you should be probably using military language to communicate about the game, because this game is about soldiers and weapons. So you should be thinking about anything else that could help you define the communication behind the game, because you're gonna use it later to tell to journalists and people about the game. If you're good at it, and at the end, a journalist is gonna make an article about your game, and he or she should be using the words that you used specifically, because that means PR and communication was tailored well and works efficiently. But USP, I know what it is, ha ha ha, do you? So this is why I'm putting more focus on this. It's super important in my opinion, and quite oftenly misunderstood. So what is unique selling point? So the dictionary definition is like this. Differentiation is one of the most important strategic and tactical activities in which companies must constantly engage. As you can see, it's not Paulo Coelho, but he could be, because he's so smart. Unique selling point is what makes your product different. And if there is no unique selling point, that means you're in a really bad situation. And unique selling point is not a generic statement like my game is a unique action RPG, because unique action RPG can be told, you can tell about it on about 1 million games. That's nothing unique or various. And sometimes unique selling point, like I said, is also a description of a product that gameplay-wise has the same content as another game, but it's done bigger, better, and deeper. That's a unique selling point. Like, for example, Age of Empires is a quite famous RTS genre game, a series of games. If there would be a new game trying to achieve the same quality or depth, that's nothing unique. But if they give something extra, like we have more units, bigger maps and everything, that's also a unique selling point. Something that a customer in the end would feel that has a benefit from, comparing to other products. And it works in every single field of marketing. If you produce bread, not games, there has to be a unique selling point, like my bread is cheaper, or my bread has more spices, or my bread is bigger. There has to be a unique feature that makes it more beneficial for the customer in the end. And that was differentiation is the area in which companies compete, because they have to have the unique selling point. And accordingly to theory, unique selling point contains the one feature of the product that most stands out as a different from the competition, and is usually a feature that conveys unique benefits to the consumer. On a side note, communicating unique selling point is a key element of branding, but that's not the topic of my speech, so this is something I can refer to more later after the talk. Anyway, please understand that your unique selling point is not a set of key features. It's one thing that makes your product really different from other products in the entire gaming industry. And since in game industry we are offering experiences or emotions, so in our very specific case, USP should communicate what kind of experience / emotions gamers are going to feel when they play the game. So your unique selling point tells what is so special about your game. If it's a strategy game super similar to other strategy games, your unique selling point that, yeah, okay, I'm playing a civilization in my game, like in Civilization 6, but in my game you have 20,000 more military units. Wherever, there has to be a super benefit for the gamer, and since in games we are offering experiences, you should focus on the very unique experiences you are offering, or emotions, in the game. Sometimes it can be thought as, I call it a bag full of slogans, which is not true, but in the end it may be. So, for example, Superhot. Superhot's unique selling point is the time moves when I move. And everything is explained. You're not telling it's a shooter. You're not telling it's got this distinctive artistic style. You're in one sentence, you are selling what is the unique selling point in a specific communication area, which is moving. Since in shooters you have to move, in this specific one, the time moves only when you move. So it's a pretty good example. And sometimes if you well describe your USP, it can give you a good reference point to your main slogan used throughout the campaign, or more slogans. And let's take a look at another example. This one of mine was an insanely good campaign that I was working on, because we had a relatively low budget. I don't remember really the numbers, but if I think about it, it was probably something between $200,000 or $300,000, which is still huge for an indie company. In the end, we've made tens of millions of dollars on the game, so I think that was a quite effective campaign. Anyway, in this one of mine, unique selling point was that we knew that it's a first game that gives an experience of war from a totally unknown perspective, that of a civilian. That was its unique hook. Because in games, be it survival, be it strategy, be it action, it doesn't really matter. War was always perceived from a perspective of soldier. So changing the perspective to civilian made it stand out from other games, and we found a very specific unique selling point. And the communication areas to talk about this unique selling point was, like you can see, in war, not everyone is a soldier. So in this communication area, we were pointing out that you shouldn't be thinking of soldiers, think about the others in war. Or every war happens at somebody's doorstep, which means that in war there are victims, and if you think about the victims, you rather think first about civilians, not soldiers. And actually, those two lines were used as slogans. The first one throughout the entire campaign to describe the game, and the other was used as a finishing line in one of the trailers I was working on. So that doesn't necessarily mean that your communication areas will be your slogans, tailored out of the unique selling point, but they can be. It depends on your feel and how you actually communicate. And those things describe the approach to creating strategy, but there are, of course, tips and tricks later on to be to be used or utilized is a better word. Please keep in mind that when we start the campaign, at the very beginning, when we start to design the game, it's super important. We pay a lot of attention to it, and from our experience, we know that the game and the marketing are, in fact, one coherent thing. We look at it in a way that it's just one, right? Creating a game, of course, is not a process, or at least it shouldn't be heavily influenced by marketing and vice versa, but in the end it's one, and both teams should communicate heavily about what they're doing and stand in one line to create a great product in the end and communicate about the product to the public. So for us it's super important to create a proper, we call it brand book, and sometimes we call it a Bible, at the very beginning that sets up the strategy. And if you define properly what the product is and what is the communication areas, it's way easier for you not only to create the product, but also to communicate about it later to the public. Now let's go to some details. So that was the strategy, but there comes the tactics. As you can see on the slide, timing is key. What we have noticed among all those years, and I have released my first game in the mid-90s, so far it was probably close to 30. I noticed there are bad and good moments for that. If you have a killer hit, any moment is good, but I will refer to it later. Just let me elaborate a little on PR bits. So when you are applying or putting in motion your marketing strategy that PR and communication is a part of, you should be thinking about so-called marketing bits or PR bits. So a preview round for your game is a heavy bit. A new trailer is a heavy bit. Announcing the date is a heavy bit. So there are so-called bits, and those bits should be separated one from another. In social media, you should be spamming people all the time. That's obvious, right? Every one tweet every 3 minutes or whatever. Some people are good at it. But classic media, at least from my experience, should not be attacked, so to speak, too often, because they may treat you as a spammer, sometimes who sends useless information too often. So I think ideal moment during a campaign to sending press releases to media is every 2 weeks. That's quite optimal. If it's a bigger time, then it's still fine. So if you, for example, announce your game and then it turns out that your game will be released a year later, you are in trouble because you should be sending sexy press releases at least once a month. And that means you really need to have a super sexy content for the media. Otherwise, they will not pick up the news. If you send too many press releases and they have generic content, sooner or later, media will start to ignore your game, and that's a bad news. And regarding the release calendar, timing is super important because looking at how we work now, how other publishers like Devolver or self-publishing teams work, ideal window for a smaller game is from January to August, keeping in mind that you should be avoiding key events like GDC or E3 or possibly Gamescom too. Then from September, AAA games are starting to fight for a space to be the #1 hit for Xmas. And you know that during Christmas, big games make 20 to 30% of the yearly income. So we are talking about huge numbers. And the one who wins the fight among the AAAs, who becomes the Christmas gift for kids, makes millions of bucks. So that means from September, there's a start of AAAs fighting for a visibility among media and for the space on the shelves. Of course, it's not a rule, because even This War of Mine was released in November, and it worked tremendously well, but we knew it's a really good game and probably it's gonna pay off, as well as Children of Morta. But Children of Morta is a slightly different piece of cake, because we originally planned to release the game last year, but the team had delays, so we had to postpone the game. And after another postpone, it turned out that the finishing process will happen in Q4 this year. So we just couldn't help. We had to make our best and release the game. And it worked tremendously well. But at the same day, for example, there was a remake of Spyro on Steam, a remake of Final Fantasy. So we had a huge competition to deal with. And as an indie developer, you should keep that in mind. So when you have no choice, yeah, release whenever possible. When you have a killer hit, like Minecraft or Superhot or Factorio, just you don't have to worry. But if your competition is pretty strong, then January to August is your release window. And that's happening because market is overcrowded. As you know, there are hundreds of new games every day, and some of them are good. That means there's a big competition to deal with. That's a story I heard from the big ones, console owners. So it's not a surprise. Most of them actually tell that smaller games should be targeting first part of the year and the vacation, the holiday, summer holiday period. Then September and fourth quarter is heavily occupied by the big games. That's also important that console gamers, not all of them, but I would say those mid-core ones, they are not so heavily involved in reading media like Rock Paper Shotgun, PC Gamer, Kotaku, or whatever. They often take their information directly from the console or from mainstream media. That means that PC market is different, because PC Gamer is rather better informed and, accordingly to my knowledge, investing more time into seeking titles, into discoverability, into reading media. So PC market is a bit easier to handle in the last part of the year when you release a game. Still, it's loaded as hell. There are hundreds of games every day. And you also should be aware that it's not that PR is a free activity. There are more and more companies who have funds to invest solid amounts of money into those activities, and that means your competition is going to be tougher and tougher. It's not going to be an easy one. And like I said, in theory, you may be thinking that PR is free stuff. It's like I'm sitting by the computer, sending Steam keys to YouTubers, writing press releases to media and hitting the send button, and it's free, like sending a Steam key is free. Actually, no, there's so much media, there's so big competition that those activities might be free if you have people to do that and you invest a lot of time for reaching out to media, for creating proper communication and press releases and so on, and sending those. But most of those activities actually are in bigger companies occupied by well-paid specialists, and ourselves at 11-bit, we are hiring PR agencies to help us as well, because it really gives a big boost to reaching out to media and to visibility. And that also gives me more time to focus on strategic approach and thinking about how should I communicate to media. Moreover, what I see is that viral power of I don't know, trailers or press releases is decreasing in opposite to paid content. So simply paying YouTubers for coverage than just offering them content for free becomes unfortunately more and more effective. And I'm pretty sure you are no surprise that huge companies like Ubisoft are spending enormous amount of money on the coverage across streaming media like YouTube and Twitch. And free-to-play companies are spending insane amount of money on user acquisition, and this is something you can... the huge companies, in fact, the free-to-play ones, are spending daily bigger amounts of money on user acquisition that you can spend on creating entire game for 2 years. And I'm no shitting you. I know such examples. We can talk about it later after the talk. Anyway, I'm talking about it because those free activities that you could consider PR are blending with getting paid coverage. So, like I said, classic PR and marketing are becoming one entity, in fact, and as such, you should be considering them. Of course, advertising will give you extra boost, be it pre-roll advertisements on YouTube or sponsored posts on Facebook. In fact, as you may have noticed, if you run your own profiles on Facebook, that organic growth is dying, and that's because how Facebook's algorithm works. It's more and more oriented towards paid posts, and that's the brutal truth, unfortunately. Yeah, this is where classic blends with marketing. And what I see is that the reach, how you simply grab media and reach out to them or your gamers. Back in the days, if you had a good trailer, it was relatively easy to conquer media with the trailer and grab visibility and spread awareness and information. Now it's more and more tough, even if you invest into super duper sexy CGI. So the paid reach is getting more effective. There are still such cases, as you may have seen, that have enough power to organically grow, like announcements. New game announcement always spreads well. News with viral power, that's something hard to measure. Sometimes just people love one trailer more than the other and no one knows why, except super duper marketing magicians. Or sometimes there is a, I call it community or a media darling, that sometimes there is a game that people on Reddit love for some reason and they give millions of upvotes, and that way you gain a lot of visibility, but those are often random effects, so you should not be counting on that. You should be rather thinking about proper strategy and applying this strategy, even if you don't have funds for that. So just making those free activities like classic ones, like I said. Another tip is that sometimes I have noticed that people are kind of wary to sending big amounts of keys to media. So I'm gonna get you an example. Last 4 titles I was working on, these are numbers of Steam keys I have sent during preview period, review period, and slightly after review period. So the top example is almost 7,000 Steam keys. Sometimes that means automatic sending via MailChimp or something like this, but to be honest, automatic sending without a proper personal approach is not so effective. So the standard one by one sending an email to media and to YouTuber and to Twitch streamer and saying, hey, Jake, here's a new game, hope you want to try it, best, Pawel, is a thing. Approximately, I think 50 to 80% of those keys are wasted because media or YouTubers ignore the message, or they are lost somewhere, or they don't want to try the game, but I really don't care. So here we have more than 15,000 keys. Those games are worth more than €10, but if we were a if you would be talking about a 10 euro game, that means that I've been sending content, digital content worth more than 150,000 euro. That's a quite amount, but I totally don't hesitate, and you shouldn't be thinking, because you want to spread awareness about your game, you want to gain visibility, so just throw those keys at people and hoping that they will cover your game. Actually, it works in many cases, but like this example shows you something. Another hint. Sometimes there's a unintentional damage, and what I mean by that, two examples. One is that latest Blizzard story about a guy who has been saying slogans about Free Hong Kong during the esport tournament. And honestly, the situation was no good answer for me. If I would be the PR guy, I would think that it's a deep shit, because whatever you do, some sites would be offended by your choice. So there is no good outcome of such choice. But if you think about the company, they are focused on making money, on making and selling games. So I think they did the right decision, because, okay, politics is one and making games is other. Like, if politics start to interfere with games, that's bad. Because we have our own businesses, we have families to support, and we want to be creating games, not making politics. At least I hope so. But whatever they chose, that was a bad choice. So in such cases, you need to be positive, you need to explain what's happening and focus on the future rather than going back to the past. And another good example, and a better one actually, is a Czech one, when Amanita had this blackface story with Huchel. Because you are Czech, you probably know what has happened. They had a blackface Huchel, and there was a outrage in the West that they are impolite toward black people, so they had to redesign Huchel. And what they did was not apologizing, but just saying, sorry, we did understand that this might be the case, so take a look at what we're doing, and they kind of tailored it into a positive example. And that's what you do when you need to control the damage that has been done. So the general rules in PR, when you meet a bad situation, and when you do something badly or something bad happens from outside within your PR and communication area, the answer is pretty much you should be thinking about being positive, focusing on what can be done in the future, rather than putting focus of people on the past and negative things that happens in the past. So put yourself in a, like Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction, a problem solver position, right? I solve problems, I show to people how to make everything better, let's look into the future, how things could be fixed and work well. So it's a pretty much general rule for damage control. And if I look at the time, yeah, I should be finishing. The last tip, it's a pretty good tip, because in marketing there's a lot of creative work. Believe it or not, that's a lot of creative work to think about communicating slogans, creating trailers, and so on. That's a pretty good one, as we use it as a method, actually. There are tools using this method, but keep that in mind. Scamper. Scamper, it's an abbreviation of substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, reverse. So if you have, for example, a product that is your game, and you are communicating about it, and you want to find some creative way about how to talk about it to gamers, think about, for example, my game is about World War II shooter. What if you substitute and put the shooter in medieval conditions? What you've combined and join the shooter with a chess game? What if you adapt to it and modify the conditions that the shooter is working on, or how you, for example, you use shooter in staying at home, playing on a couch, and you communicated about it that you're in a tank, where it's a different theoretically use, but still a use. So this method is helping you, if you think about it, how to twist your product or communication about your product, just as a method of creating thinking. And you can Google it, Scamper creativity method. There's a lot of articles about it, and I heavily recommend it. And pretty much this is it. Thank you. You can guys catch me. I'll be hanging around here, and thank you for your time. Do we have questions? Pawel.
Definitely we have time for some questions. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. Or question. One question is enough. Oh, we have one question.
I love you. Yes.
Hi. What was your experience with any early access PR, marketing? I don't know, I think Frostpunk was early access. I'm not sure. But
no, we haven't released a single game on early access, but my experience towards it is that when you have a premiere, it's your premiere anyway. And so you should be treating early access debut like a fully blown release of the game. So full communication and so on, unless your product is really good and engagement with the community and heavy updates build organically huge community about it, then you can tailor your strategy, your campaign towards the big finale, which is a true premiere. But please notice it worked only in a few cases of huge notable successes, like Space Engineers, for example, another brilliant game from Czech Republic. But mostly games who do not treat the early access as a fully blown premiere and do not deliver big updates and are not sexy enough themselves are losing the momentum. So for me, early access is like a real debut. The only difference is that there is no user reviews, as far as I remember, on Steam, and media don't give you reviews before the game is considered as full release.
We have another question over there, and the last one over there.
Hi. You mentioned that the best release window is between January and August. Do you think this also applies to mobile free-to-play games?
Well, that's harder because in mobile free-to-play games there is a huge competition every day, and nowadays you have from 20 to 30 releases on Steam, and on iOS and Google Play that's, from what I remember, from 300 to 500 a day. So the competition is huge. But I think there is no ideal period, because I'm not sure if free-to-play giants are fighting so heavily for Christmas window, because they are not selling boxes or retail edition and such. On the other hand, if you think that free-to-play companies are heavily dependent on tablet and cell phone distribution, and many of those devices are being sold as gifts for Christmas as well in our Western culture, that means that probably there's a bigger boost in free-to-play as well in Christmas period. So that would mean that huge companies are spending more for user acquisition during those days as well. I'm not saying that in free-to-play area there are no companies who are successful from the small seed to the big tree way, but it's way harder when you think about budgets that King and Supercell and others are spending on user acquisition. It's just whatever happens that you may be successful in organic growth, but be aware that from the very first day you compete with giants.
Okay. And here's the next question.
Thanks. Hello, I wanted to ask, when you are preparing the PR campaigns At which point do you start thinking about localization, and how is it?
Can you be a bit louder?
At which point, when preparing the PR campaigns, do you start thinking about localization, and how is it connected to the localization of the actual games?
Yeah, at the very beginning as well. So when we start about thinking about the campaign, which is the very first day we start to think about the game, we also think about the localizations, which at this moment means a set of standard areas, which is English, French, German, Spanish, Italian not so much, Russian, simplified Chinese, Brazilian, Portuguese, and often Turkish, Italian, and Polish. And Polish not because we are from Poland, but Poland become quite a big market for games. When I look at big AAAs from United States, they are in 99%, they are always localized to Polish, and that's because Poland is a big market. Keep in mind, its population is 4 times bigger than Czech Republic, and even if we have a solid sales in Czech Republic, it's still a bit too small for us to consider localization, while Poland is a no-brainer, and we usually think about it at the very beginning as well. The problem is that we often tend to fix the language part even at the very late stage, so we're almost in 99% of cases delayed on translations, and often we have the basics like French, German, Spanish at day one, and 2-3 days later we deliver the extra translations. But that's rather our development problem, not marketing problem. Okay.
Last question here.
Hi, I have a simple question. If you think, do you think that the game as service and game as product has the same PR and marketing?
I think game as a service, yeah, it's a way of how you can market the game for sure, but it's pretty much different for free games and a lot different for premium, but premium can go into that model as well, like we did, for example, with This War of Mine. To give you an example, the game was released more than 5 years ago, and along the way we have delivered, I don't know, probably around 10 free expansions, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paid expansions. So it worked partially as a service because over those 5 years we've been constantly improving the game and expanding, and with every expansion and every discount, still the sales were amazing. We on the 5th anniversary, which happened actually 2 weeks ago, we've delivered new content for free. It was called Final Cut, and the game landed in top 20 best sellers on Steam again, because we treat such game as a service, but not in a way that free-to-play works, but in a way that your basic premium version should be selling. If you want to maintain the long tail in a proper way, you should be thinking about free updates to make the community go back to your game. And if you want to make extra revenue streams, then you should be thinking about bigger paid updates as well. And that's the strategy we are applying, and that's the strategy we are applying to Frostpunk as well, and it works.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pawel, for your talk, and you can catch Pawel around.